Hey, good morning and from Concord, California. I haven't done a video in a while, but I saw one the other day from a guy who was talking about once you've been on a ship for a while, what were the things that you didn't expect? And I kind of want to go over that as somebody who came into the union later in life. I joined after 50, started sailing later in life, started sailing after 50 after working, in commercial kitchens on land for a long, long time. So I'm going to talk today about 6 things that I did not expect, but are a very real part of working on a ship that are very unique that you probably aren't going to face on land. So one thing I want to talk about is your energy and how you interact with your shipmates. As somebody who's super high energy and an extrovert, one thing I really had to learn coming onto the ships is that you have to respect other people's space and peace. So a lot of people work on these ships are there's definitely a very specific kind of archetype on the ship that's very, neurodivergent, very good at their jobs, nice people, but they, you don't want to be too much, on a ship. You're going to drive your shipmates crazy and they're not going to like you. When I was this last time at Piney Point, there was a guy there who, from New York, big loud New Yorker, and he would stop me every day and he'd be like, "Hey, I just want to tell you how amazing you are." And I just kept thinking to myself, you're going to have a rough time on the ship because nobody needs to hear from you that they're amazing. They just want you to do your job, stay out of the way, be polite. So yeah, you gotta try to let people be in their groove, be in their space, and not, exert your own needs and for attention or whatever on the people around you. You'll drive everybody crazy. So I definitely would highly recommend a less is more approach to social interactions on the ship. Be polite, be nice. If people want to talk, but I would not go be in everybody's, face and their energy trying to get a lot of attention. You'll drive everybody nuts. Like the people that I work with in the galley, for the most part, have never worked in a restaurant. They don't have any culinary background. Even my bosses, their full experience is being on the ships. And most of them have only eaten, regional food from right where they live. They don't have a knowledge base of food. I've been on ships where my bosses will put like shit on a shingle on the menu, or just, you have to be prepared for the fact that, they started as a dishwasher or cleaning the rooms for the officers, and then after that they were probably helping to make breakfast, cutting fruit, and then after that they're a cook in the galley. And so you will hear sailors say that, it's very hit or miss in the galley, and that's why. It's because, you may get a wonderful Southern woman who, makes amazing Southern food, and you're very lucky to have her because, you're going to not have a very varied diet. There's not going to be a lot of variety, but what you do get will be thoughtfully made and well seasoned. And so that is by and large the majority of, people that are running the galley and making the food in the galley. They just don't, they haven't worked in restaurants. They haven't, even though they've traveled, I don't think that they've really been inspired to try food in the places where they've traveled. So they still are very focused on whatever their local Virginia cuisine or local Florida cuisine is. So yeah, that's kind of an issue, and you'll hear people say all the time. But the problem is like, I can make the fanciest stuff you can imagine. I can make the fanciest Mexican tacos with handmade tortillas, and I'll have somebody from Jacksonville complain that they're not getting a Taco Bell taco with a crunchy taco and, yellow processed cheese. So you're never gonna please everybody, but in my experience, if you at least taste everything before you send it out, and you respect people's dietary needs, then you're gonna have a mostly happy crew. One thing that you don't think about when you join the union. I mean, I think all of us join because we're excited to travel and excited to see all these foreign places. And I have seen, like, so I've traveled so much. It's been really, really like my favorite part of the job, honestly. But what you don't realize is not every port is a great place to visit. There are some places where you're not going to be allowed off the ship. We had that experience in Kuwait. So for pretty much the entire 3-month contract that I was sailing in the Gulf of Persia, or the Persian Gulf, I didn't really get off the ship. So and that makes for a really, really grouchy crew, a stressed out and grouchy crew. And it sucks because, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes about Middle East not being very friendly to women, but it is it's a beautiful country, and it's ancient. And I would have loved to have gone and seen some of the sites. And my interactions with actual Persians, they were incredibly hospitable and very generous and very respectful. So, I'm sad that I didn't get to go check that out. The other situation that you will find is you'll be very excited that you're going to the Philippines, and then you get to the Philippines, and the Philippine government survives on, I mean, I don't know about survives, but they definitely heavily, you have to bribe them to do like anything. So if your ship isn't bribing the Filipino people when they come in, or the government when they come in, you're not going to get to really get off the ship. So you can literally be sitting, out at anchor, staring at Manila for 2 or 3 weeks, but not able to actually leave or actually, get off the ship and go do anything. So, and some of the ports are just like shitholes. Like I mean, come on, even in California, like I live right by the Port of Oakland, and the area right around the Port of Oakland, it's not like, a nice area. It's like it's a very economically like sad area with like homeless people, and there's not really, I mean, you can get in an Uber and you can go somewhere. It's easy to do, obviously, if you're American and you're in America, but there are places where that is not the case. You might get somewhere, like when we were in Dubai, we could theoretically like leave and go out, but it took almost 2 hours to get through the process. It was 3 checkpoints from the ship to the opening of the port, and then you had to go through customs, and you had to have an agent. And so it's like, sometimes it's just not worth it. And it kind of sucks because, who doesn't want to see Dubai, I mean, and I did see it a little. We crew changed there, so I left, and I got to see like the drive through town and the airport. But yeah, so that's something you have to be prepared for. You're there to work. You're not on vacation, and whatever's happening, with the work schedule of that ship, you have to realize that you're there to work. I mean, there when we were in Panama, my captain very generously made arrangements for all of us to go out in Panama, and there were a lot of sailors on the ship that had been sailing for 20 years that had never been able to get off in Panama, which everybody has to go through the canal. So we kind of anchor out and we wait for our turn to go through the canal. But our captain made arrangements for us to all get off, and it was so much fun. But there were people on the ship that couldn't do it because they had to work, or they couldn't do it because they didn't have the right, visas or whatever to get off the ship. So just be prepared mentally that yes, you're traveling all over. You're going to go to some great places, but there's also some places that you're going to go that are not going to be great. It's not going to be, an ideal situation, or you won't be able to leave the ship. So, the thing I also didn't expect, because I came into the industry late in life. So I had already worked, I already had bills, I wasn't in a financial position where I could take 4 to 7 months off and go through the apprenticeship program at my union, which I highly recommend if you can. If you can afford, if you're a young kid and you're looking at college or going in the union, I highly recommend the union. And it's only 3 months. I don't know when they're going to bump it back up to 7, but 3 months is a great amount of time to go. And you're going to have a good time at Piney Point. It's beautiful there. You'll meet some great people that you will network with for the rest of your career. So I highly recommend it if you can afford to do it. For me, that wasn't the case. So I didn't have a lot of knowledge of the union. When I went to go find out how to become a mariner, they basically told me that they had a special program going on during COVID to kind of like rebuild their ranks, because they had lost like 20% of their membership during the COVID crisis. It just like, a bunch of people just left and didn't come back. So they needed to rebuild to service their clients. So they had a special program called the CCAP program, CCAP program, and I had people just guide me, through that process, like the whole time. So I applied to actually go into the union, and they said, we need, you have to come take this assessment. You have all of this experience. You've got culinary degrees already, blah, blah, blah. So I did. So I did this assessment. I ended up there for 4 weeks, just taking whatever I could take. I took VPS, whatever that class is, in military vessels, and like, helo fire, like all kind of stuff. Okay. It was fun. I love going. I actually really like going to Piney Point and going to the classes. But so I went and did a bunch of stuff, and then they sent me straight out as a chief cook. I was chief cook for probably 6 weeks before I was promoted to chief steward on the ship that I was on. So most people have to do the 3 to 7 month program. Then they have to go for a year or two and be an SA, on these ships, which is like a dishwasher, right? So they're going to clean, they're going to do the dishes, they're going to serve the food, they're going to clean the officers' quarters, they're going to do laundry, right? So they do like this very menial. I mean, they get paid really well. I mean, they're paid like $5,000 to $7,000, a month to do this job. But so they go do that, and then they have to go back and take the chief cook class, and then they can go out as a chief cook. Then they have to go out as a chief cook for a year, right? So they have to go out for 6 months and take a galley ops class, and then they have to go out for another 6 months, and then they have to take the chief steward class, right? So they have to do, it could take them 5 years, of working very regularly and all these classes and all of this stuff to become chief steward, which I had done in 6 weeks, right? So there was definitely like, and I didn't realize it at the time, I'm just like on this ship, and the person that was doing it was leaving and they needed somebody. And I was like, they were like, we think you can do the job. And I was like, great, I'm happy to do the job. It was a lot more money. Happy to do it, and, but as I went on in my my career in the union, I realized that there is like a lot of anger towards that program, from the people who had to work, all that time. I haven't worked with a single other person since I left that one ship where we all were CCAP. But since then, I haven't worked with a single person who was CCAP. And I'm telling you right now, I have been treated pretty poorly and with a lot of prejudice. And I don't mean racial prejudice. I mean, prejudice against the fact that I didn't have to go through the same process that they did to become steward, right? So I have my last 3 bosses. One of them was fine, but the 2 female bosses I had were both very difficult to work with and very um, just, it's hard to explain. It was just like kind of a nightmare. But a lot of that came from, and maybe some of it was racial prejudice, but I think a lot more of it had to do with the fact that they had to do this whole thing and I didn't. And I was there making like the big money and I didn't have to go do that. Now, what they don't realize, obviously, I did all that stuff out in restaurants before I became, you know, an executive chef and before so I have done that stuff. But, and 2 years, you know, plus of school. So, anyway, but there's definitely an anti-CCAT bias that I experienced, and I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting, but yeah. So be prepared that if you come in as a C card too. So if you come in as a C card and you haven't done the program, you're not going to be treated the same way. You're going to be treated a little kind of shitty. So just be prepared for that. But you'll go, once you get in some time and you go take some upgrading classes and stuff, the union does get a little more invested in you. So that's all about the union members. This next part is going to be about the union itself. So I go through the Oakland Hall, which is a really good hall. I'm very lucky. Anytime I've had to do anything outside of that Oakland Hall has been a nightmare. So I feel like I have certain people at the Oakland Hall, my person at the Oakland Hall who's pretty invested in me, and she's very on top of my stuff. But a lot of the other people, I feel like if you haven't gone through the program, they're not really willing to take any time for you. And so if you are trying to get into the union without doing the apprenticeship program, I highly recommend going to Oakland, and I highly recommend going to some of the halls that don't have like the super glamorous routes. So that's going to be like the Great Lakes, right? So if you go to the Great Lakes, like they're not going to Taiwan and Japan and all these fun, cool places, but you're going to get the C time that you need to go back and upgrade and do that, all of that stuff. And once you do that, I think especially if you're a man, I feel like as a woman, I have not been treated well by the male faction of the union. Like I feel like I have been treated incredibly dismissively. My calls aren't returned, my emails aren't returned. One of them was supposed to get me a job out of the Piney Point hall. I mean, 3 or 4 weeks go by. This guy isn't returning my calls. He's not getting me work. I walk into Oakland Hall in 20 minutes. I have a job. So I highly recommend you try to establish a relationship with at least one person who is aware of your situation, who knows you personally, who is responsive to your calls. I've also had the union actually block me from getting work multiple times, which is always crazy to me. So yeah, like I said, I kind of got into the union and was fast-tracked through this program and became a steward pretty quickly. More quickly than is like kind of what is the normal path, and also what the union supports, right? So because of COVID and like they were having issues, I just got like, you know, but I didn't know that. I'm thinking like, okay, cool, I'm just doing my job, you know. I'm doing it well enough that I'm getting promoted. So that after I came home and tried to get other steward jobs, I actually had Manpower block me multiple times. And they were just like, even though ships couldn't leave port, even though, so it was like, and I had a conversation with somebody when I was at Piney Point last time, at the school last time, who had been in for a long time, and he'd, you know, gone through the program, like did everything the right way, and he was now a steward. And he was just like, it's just not fair. You know, I did everything that was asked of me, and why do you get to bypass that? You know, he's like, this is a union. It's not a meritocracy. It's not, I joined and I've done everything to become an A card and everything to become a steward that they told me I had to do. And so it's not fair that you got to bypass all that. So as of January 1st of this year, January 1st, 2025, a lot of the a lot of the special dispensations kind of that they had going to service clients through COVID, because they had lower membership, have been ended. So like a bunch of us who came in through CCAP, a lot of them didn't finish the program. So like you have to go back and you have to take the chief cook class. And the chief cook class, when I took it this recently in November, was a 5-week class, and it was a lot of fun. I always have fun when I go to Piney Point, but they just bumped it to 10 weeks. So and for most of us who came in CCAP, we came in that way because we can't afford to take 3 or 4 months off work to do the apprenticeship program. So it's going to be rough for all these CCAP people who didn't complete it during that special dispensation time. And I was the last 5-week class, and I remember just contacting a few of my friends that I knew that were in CCAP and just saying, I hope you realize, that like, and if you don't finish it, they're going to bump you down to SA. Like, you're not going to be able to continue working as a chief cook if you don't finish the program, right? You had a certain amount of time to finish the program. I finished it as quickly as I could, literally as quickly as I could. And I wasn't the last CCAP class, I don't think. I think that there were a couple after me. But yeah, so I do feel like they kind of regret doing it. I think they kind of regret bringing all these like very trained chefs who don't come from a military background, come from a restaurant background, into this incredibly closed system. Like sometimes they'll ask me to make a dish and they have a very specific idea of how this dish is made. And I'm going to use the example of Kahlua pork, right? Well, so, I worked in Hawaii for a year, and I've been there many, many times. And Kahlua pig is, you bury a pig in the ground, and it's kind of got like a smoky, steamed like flavor, right? Like that's Kahlua pig. These guys, Kahlua pig is basically like pork shoulder and cabbage that's been stewed together. Well, that's not Kahlua pig, out in Hawaii. But in this case, in SIU land, it is. Like, that's what they mean when they put that on the menu. And there's no use arguing about it, because they're probably trying to stretch some pork and get rid of some cabbage, and like there's a whole, purpose behind it. But there are definitely some what I would call SIU isms in the Galley that you like, if you come from not SIU, if you come from outside, you're gonna be like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? But yeah, but the sooner you get over that and just try to be helpful and supportive to your stewards who they want to deal with a bunch of questions and a bunch of like, you're doing this wrong and like nobody wants to deal with that. So do your best to just try to figure out what they want and ask for a recipe if you think you're gonna need it, and just like quietly do your work. Another thing I would say is that accommodations can be very hit or miss. So I've only been on one ship where people really had to share rooms, and that was on a larger 65 to 75 person crew, and it was still just the lowest ranking people on the ship. So it was the oilers, the wipers, and the SAs who shared rooms. Every once in a while the ABs might have to share a room, but not very often. On most ships, container ships I've been on, and other ships that I've been on, you don't share a room, you have your own room. So but one thing they don't tell you, so the beds are like, I don't know if they're not really, I don't think they're really standard twin beds. They're a little smaller, and some of the mattresses are so uncomfortable. So what I have done in almost every ship that I've been on is I have figured out a way via Amazon or what have you to have a overlay shipped to me. So I've definitely had like the little 1 or 2 inch bed covers like sent to me. I haven't really had problems with pillows and blankets and things like that. They always usually have those on the ship for you. I would not waste space in your luggage for these items, because you have plenty of other things you need to bring, and they're always readily available. But yeah, so I've had giant rooms. My last ship that I was on was a Pasha ship, and it was a great room. It was a nice big room, well appointed. It'll almost always have a desk and a bed and a bathroom. I've never had to share a bathroom. I've never had to share a room. So, but it does happen. So you have to be prepared for that, especially when you're first starting out. If you're a sea card, if you're at the bottom of the totem pole as far as rank goes, you may have to share a ship or share a room. Working conditions can be brutal. When we were in the Middle East, it was 110, 112 degrees outside. I watched my electrician, who was very thin anyway. He probably dropped 20 pounds on the ship, and I was actually concerned about his health. And he was eating like 2 or 3 portions, at every meal. So it wasn't that he wasn't eating, but it was just, everybody would walk in sheeting sweat, like soaking wet with sweat. It was so unbearably hot. And you're still working out there however many hours a day, in the sun, in the Persian Gulf, in the desert. So you can also be freezing. You can also be working, and it's like snowing. You're in New Hampshire in January. So yeah, working conditions can be pretty brutal, but you're still gonna have to work. So please be prepared that no matter what's going on, it's 7 days a week you're working, and you have to figure out a way to stay cool. A lot of the guys had big buckets of ice water. We do have ice machines on the ship. I haven't been on one that didn't, and they were just drenching their hats and things in the ice water and putting them on their head. We did have 2 people, not on Pasha, on another ship. We had 2 people who got heat stroke, passed out. So it's definitely a thing. So just be smart. Your bosun probably is a good resource to talk to if you need help figuring out how to stay safe, stay healthy. If you think something is wrong or you feel funny, you also want to let them know so that you're not passing out or getting heat stroke, which puts you out of commission for much, much longer. They'd much rather spend a half hour getting you, hydrated and some electrolytes in you than you be out of work for 3 or 4 or 5 days. So keep that in mind. Like, please do take your safety and your health seriously on the ships. One of the other things, I know people talk about, they always ask me, do you get seasick? I do not. But there are times on a ship where the weather is rough, and especially in the winter months in the Pacific, where I typically have been in the Pacific Ocean, it can get like wild and woolly. Like, there are days in the galley where I'm like, we just can't turn the deep fryer on because literally the hot oil is, splashing over the edge of the deep fryer. So, and knives are sliding and eggs are sliding and everything is sliding. And there have been ships I've been on where I'm literally launched out of bed. So you're in bed and you're trying to sleep and you just get, like launched out of bed. And you're working, you're working on scaffolding, you're working on all kinds of, slippery decks and all kinds of stuff in this weather. So you have to have non-slip shoes. You have to wear the PPE, personal protective equipment. You have to, take it seriously. You'll have a shelf somewhere near your bed where you can put, your phone when you're charging it at night or whatever. And, if those sea's going to be rough, you need to clear that off. You're going to be getting hitting the head, you know, in the middle of the night with your phone. You need to take your laptop off your desk because it could slide off and break. So yeah, my captains, I have, even the captain that was, you know, really rough to work with, 1,000% they prioritize your safety. They're not going to take you into a situation that's actually, you know, like dangerous, but you will be in rough seas, and you have to be prepared to tie everything down, you know, your chair. I didn't my first night that we were in rough seas on the Pasha ship, on the Georgia 3rd, and I didn't tie my chair down, and it slid across the floor, smacked my bed, and part of the bed like came apart. So, you know, be prepared for very rough weather. If you do have issues with seasickness, I know that you can get Dramamine from the first mate usually, or the MDR if you have one on the ship, but I don't recommend it. It'll make you really sleepy and really out of it. If you can get the little ginger candies, or like little hard candies, but they're very high in like ginger content, those have been very successful on the ships that I've been on to keep seasickness at bay. I normally don't get seasickness, but when I was on Dependable out in the Pacific, and we were out at sea for probably 40 days, and I would say 25 of those days were really rough. And after 20 days of being in rough seas, you are like done. You are so ready to not be bracing yourself all day long. And, you know, it's exhausting. It's exhausting because simple things that you would normally do become very hard and very complicated when you're trying to just stand in a stable position or hold your cutting board so that it's not sliding around while you're trying to cut stuff, you know what I mean? So it is very tiring and exhausting to be in rough seas for an extended period of time. So yeah. Now I'm going to talk about something that's really important to try to figure out, and I am still figuring it out, right? Is drama on the ships. So on my last ship, I am pretty sure that if they could have thrown me off the ship, or my captain and my steward could have thrown me off the ship and kept right on going, that it might have happened. Okay, so and you'll see when you're on a ship, it's really hard when you're having any kind of interpersonal difficulty, because you just don't get a break from it. Like, you are working 7 days a week. You're in that kitchen from 5:30 in the morning till 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And you have to navigate, usually, you know, with your tormentor, or, you know, you have two choices, right? Like in any situation, you have two choices. And SASH is like a huge thing now. So sexual assault and sexual harassment training, and there's like a zero tolerance. So if I go at any point to my captain and I say, hey, this person is harassing me, it's a huge big deal. It's a huge big deal. Okay. So be very careful how you wield that weapon. You know what I mean? I have not, like, I have gone in and said, I have problems, or they have problems with me or whatever, and we're trying to work it out. But I've never been like, yes, I'm filing, you know, with the Coast Guard or whatever, which is something you can do and you should do if you feel like you need to. But I just hasn't come to that yet. But keep in mind that there's no escape. Like, unless you leave the ship, and I have seen it happen. Like on my last ship, the captain was such a difficult person to work with that when he came back to the ship, an unusually large percentage of people left. They all just said, I don't want to work with this guy. Like, I'm a micromanager. He's really unpleasant to work with. I'm leaving. And they did, including my steward. Like, so including my boss, like, they all left. And I was like, how bad can it be? I'm really good at my job. It's going to be fine. And he was terrible, honestly, terrible. And I actually, you know, I mean, it manifested in me having problems with my steward, but it really was, I think, he was micromanaging her, and so she micromanaged me, you know, which obviously I wasn't happy with. But So yeah, you're gonna have there's always drama on the ship, and you have to navigate it like a grown up. Like you can't get lost in your ego. You can't get lost in, at the end of the day, people have to do their job. Like you just need to focus on doing your job. Hopefully you can get them to focus on doing their job instead of like focusing on whatever the conflict is with you. And just be a professional and do your job, because at the end of the day, there are tons of other ships you can work on, right? So like just put your head down and get through it if you can. If it's really egregious, take it to your bosun, take it to your captain, and just say, I'm struggling with this. After, of course, you've talked to the person directly. And if it's still a problem, then, that's just how it rolls sometimes on the ships. I mean, I've seen people just like literally get into like physical altercations because they aren't getting along. And it's rough, because you're kind of stuck out at sea with somebody that you don't really like, who doesn't really like you, and there's no escape from it. Like you're just stuck with it. So you have to be able to mentally prepare for the fact that uh you're gonna run up against people who don't like you or that you don't like, and you're gonna have to act like a professional and deal with it. Part of that is the whole thing I was talking about earlier with energy. Like, don't put all your energy out there, because somebody's gonna feed into it and they're gonna attach onto it, and it's just, then all of a sudden you become the focus of somebody else's existence instead of like them and their job and their life and whatever. So yeah, like keep your energy kind of as low key as you can, and try to just be a professional in some of these situations with people, like your bosses who are being assholes. If they throw something at you, if they're whatever, you gotta talk to the captain. Those are SASH violations. And some of these old school guys have gotta learn. They gotta learn what the new rules are, and adjust and adapt. So if you really feel like, somebody is egregiously breaking rules, I would definitely, formally, complain. But then be prepared. Like it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of bullshit. You go on a list somewhere that, you're a complainer. So if you're somebody who's complaining all the time, you're the problem. You know what I mean? So just keep all that in mind before you, pull the trigger on getting the U.S. Coast Guard involved and all of that, which you should do, absolutely should do if it's warranted. But I see people all the time, and now it's to the point where I think a lot of the guys don't want to work with women anymore. I think they were always a little sus of us, but now they're just like waiting for us to complain about them and file sash complaints about them. And so I think it's really important for all of us to go through the chain of command, to try to, in a professional way, resolve issues and problems without bringing out the big guns, and not be frivolous about these situations. It's really important that if you have a real problem, you deal with it. But if there's any other way to deal with it in a good way, I would do the other way certainly first. So that's really like probably the main things that I wasn't expecting, that are kind of more difficult than I expected, but I still really love my job. I still highly recommend, if you are interested in becoming a mariner, that you go do it. I bought my first home by myself in June of 2024. I have been to so many beautiful, amazing countries in the last 2 years. It's definitely worthwhile, but I just think that, the more that you know about the pros and the cons, the better prepared you are to really get the most out of the job, the most out of the vocation.